Hello, folks. The U.S. war on peace continues. I think we are now officially leading the war on peace.
Oh,
What?
I just had a really cool epiphany.
Okay.
You know how in the war on drugs, the drugs won, war on terror won. Maybe.
Maybe peace could win.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although I will say this, though, this is a U.S. war on peace. Usually, the thing the U.S. is pretending to fight, they're not really fighting. So the U.S. war on drugs was really to go after, activist communities and black communities and stuff.
Can you not ruin it?
So the
I
war.
had like a
So, oh, okay. Well, I'm just saying, like the war on peace, they actually really are fighting against peace. That's real.
I can't have anything.
I wasn't like ruining your stance,
Also,
your epiphany.
what
No,
is
that was to remind me not to curse so much because apparently it's hurting my monetization.
can we show it on the screen?
No, don't.
It says no beep given. We're not supposed to say the beep part because
Well,
apparently that
apparently, so after years and years,
YouTube doesn't show
after-
your
After years
Can
and
I say
years, no,
shit?
yeah, you can say shit. Apparently, they view the F word differently than other words. Okay, we've gotten off on so many different tangents, but I hate,
Hello,
I
that's
hate
what
the
happens
whole.
when I'm here.
That's what Eleanor's job is. I hate the whole YouTube algorithm garbage. But if it means that more people are going to learn the real news, if I just decrease the number of Fs by 70%, then all right, so be it. Screw you, YouTube. How was that? Was that better?
That was good.
That'll probably still hurt my. All right.
Just for future reference, don't put something that delicious.
What are you like 3?
Yes.
Stop just grabbing things and holding them up. All right. This has started very poorly, but let's get into it. In terms of I wanted to start with this. So we're going to get into Biden's speech that he gave to the nation. If anyone still believes anything he said, I'm not going to play any of it. However, I will read a few lines. But he's combining like the U.S. proxy war in Ukraine and the U.S. Facilitating of a genocide in Gaza and the U.S. insane war against Iran that we've had going. He's combining all those into one just garbage heap, which is basically an admission that this is all connected to U.S. empire. But we'll get to that in a moment. I wanted to start off by, where is it? Start off by discussing just for a second this, and I mentioned it yesterday, this insanity that Israel was not responsible for bombing the hospital that killed 500 people. A, of course they were. B, as I said yesterday, they're committing war crimes after war crimes after war crimes. So what is one more? Like, oh no, we didn't do that one. We did all the others. But even beyond that, this has come out. This is from the French press. Apparently, the imagery that's been shown by many as proof of the rocket that was fired by Hamas, supposedly, that then accidentally circled back and hit a hospital in a way that Hamas is not even capable of. This is French press is revealing that this video has been around since 2022. This is not actually the video of a rocket being fired by Hamas and then circling back and hitting the hospital.
I do wonder how many.
Sorry.
That's just Lee's thing. I do wonder how many military officials or even journalists who are well aware of the military capacity of Gaza knew that this was bullshit
Right.
as soon as as soon as this went out, knew that it was bullshit, but didn't say anything.
Like immediately. Because not only would it be insane for Hamas to do this intentionally or unintentionally, but they don't even have the capability to bomb a hospital and kill 500 people. Like that is.
Also, why the hell wouldn't you? That's one of the only places that you can take people that are being genocided by Israel. Why would you then bomb that? That's so fucking. I mean, that's the other thing is that. When I was speaking to Nora Barrows Friedman, which I know that she was on your live stream as well, one of the things that she said, that there's no, like, people's brains turn to marshmallows, and there's no thinking about like the tactics of these choices that are supposedly done by Hamas, like the idea of beheading a bunch of children, which has now been debunked thoroughly. But the idea, like, her point was like, what the fuck? What? See, I caught myself. Why the hell? Why would they do that? Like, what would that tactically do? And of course, the point is nothing. But that makes them sound just so evil, that they're that bad, they're that evil, that they're willing to do something that is totally tactically pointless.
Right.
But of course, in reality, that's not it. Like, that's not the case. And so the question then has to be asked, like, okay, what would this do for them? What would bombing a hospital, kind of like with the Nord Stream, right? Like, what would it do for Russia to blow up their own pipeline?
Their own
Like,
billion-dollar pipeline.
what would that do for you? Nothing. But like, nobody asks the next fucking question. Like, I wonder, that seems like a very self-damaging choice. Nobody goes that far.
Yeah. So I mean, it's been laughable from the start. But one of the bigger points is, don't get bogged down into a fight with someone about that hospital. We know, and Israel has admitted to endless war crimes over the past several days. They bombed schools. They bombed churches. Actually, the one I was going to bring up next, let's see, before we get to those, is Israel now seems to be bombing like 1,000 and 2,000-year-old cultural sites. Which is what you do in a war or an atrocity like this, when you're trying to just like harm the culture of the people. You're not just going after human beings. And as Alan McLeod says, after destroying a 1,600-year-old church last night, Israel also leveled a 1,400-year-old great mosque of Gaza. Here are some of the images.
I think this also highlights an important point. Like, the hospital was a Christian hospital that was bombed. Israel bombed a church. I think this is also important to note, that we oftentimes don't talk about Palestinian Christians, or Christians living in what is now called Israel, but there are a lot of them, because guess what? It's their quote unquote holy land as well. And they've lived there for a long time as well. And so that conversation gets lost a lot. But Christians, and because that's part of the by design, right? They want you to think this is, Judaism versus the evil Islam, and that it's therefore a religious war, and the Jews are trying to protect our religion. But that's of course BS. And events like this are further proof of that, right? Israel is leveling shit regardless of whether it's Christian or Muslim. Like Lee said, that they want to destroy cultures, and that cultural aspect is Palestinian, and it's about erasing the idea that there ever was something before the land of Israel, which, by the way, is younger than my father. Think about that for a second. And he's not like 100, like he's doing fine. So the idea is to erase that history, a lot like what has happened in this country, with the idea that like no one was here before Puritans came and with their buckles on their hats, and
right.
It's this idea
Columbus discovered this area,
right? That it was this new world, right? There was nothing here, and so we built this city upon a hill. Israel is this is textbook settler colonialist strategy. And so this is what they're attempting to do with these actions. And I mean, what's also funny, just one final point here, what's also funny in a really dark and morbid, sick way, is that you're also erasing Jewish history and culture by doing this. Because as we know, Jews have lived in the land that was until recently called Palestine for generations, right? I mean, Jews have been around 6,000 years, and Jews have been a part of that area for that time. We've also been everywhere else because we move. But
we got these two legs
two legs that we like. But so you're actually destroying your own history and your own culture, a culture that has always existed amongst other cultures. And so I think that that's also something that necessarily gets lost, because it doesn't fit into these perfect binary systems of good versus evil, and Jews versus Muslims, and light versus dark. In reality, there is no binary like that. And again, those images really show that.
And you just made a perfect segue to the next point. But before I mention that one,
You're welcome.
I want to say that the church I mentioned they bombed, that Alan McLeod also mentioned, is the third oldest church in the world. So Israel has bombed, destroyed the third oldest church in existence. And they really are, right now, they are wiping out whole segments of history that, despite the disgusting behavior of humans for thousands of years, I mean, the Crusades and all this awful shit that has gone down, despite all of that, we managed to keep some of these buildings around. And yet here is Israel blowing up 1,400-year-old buildings, 1,600-year-old buildings. It really is unbelievable. But the great segue I wanted to get to was that you're mentioning how these religions are connected and things like that, and there's no binary. And there's a great point to be made about who exactly are Zionists, because it's not just Jews. And you and
Mostly not.
and that's what I'm going to let you lead with that in a second. But you and I have talked a lot about how Zionism is not Judaism, and there are many Jews like you and me who are not Zionist and don't support Israel's apartheid state. But it's useful to the propaganda to conflate the two, because it allows for Zionists, those who believe that Israel should be able to do whatever the fuck they want. It allows for, well, we said the show with you is going to be The Control, so we're going to see if that one does worse because of the, anyway.
So I should say fuck more often.
I wouldn't do it more often.
Okay.
That ruins the experiment. So I don't remember what I was saying. Oh, the Zionism thing. It's useful for the propaganda for them to conflate the two, because then any criticism of Zionism is anti-Semitic if you act like Judaism and Zionism are the same thing.
Did you say Judaism?
No, I said Judaism. Oh, I do I lose the D a little, don't I?
I like Judaism. I like that.
Jewish.
Like it becomes a chewy kind of word. I like it.
Chewy or Jewy? All right. So go ahead with your point you were about to make.
So I follow this account on Instagram, which I highly recommend to people because they're wonderful. It's called Jewitches. And
which is not a sandwich made of Jews.
No, it's all spooky and we cast spells on people. So it's basically like Jewish mysticism. So they posted something about Christian Zionism the other day, and they linked to this study. And it was a study done at the Queen's University, Belfast, that found that Christian Zionists outnumbered Jews like astronomically. So in the United States alone, just in this country, there are 30 million Christian Zionists estimated. The highest
30 million Christians who say that,
right. Like as in not Jews.
There should be a Jewish state of Israel and it should largely be able to do whatever the hell it wants.
Right. The highest global estimate of Jews is 16.1 million.
So there are more,
like double just in the United States. And I wanted to just share a couple of notes from this study, which Leah has up on the screen right now.
Wait, can I just say this louder though for 1 second?
Sure, go ahead.
Just in the United States, there are double the number of Christian Zionists than there are Jews in the world. And not all Jews are Zionists. So that means there's probably not triple, not quadruple, I don't know, like 10 times as many Christian Zionists just in the United States than there are Jewish Zionists, which makes Israel really a more of a Christian supported system than it is Jewish supported.
And the funny thing about Christian Zionists is that they're anti-Semites.
Yes.
Wait, it gets better. So the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948 was viewed by Christian Zionists as being the historical event of greatest importance in heralding the fulfillment of biblical prophecy. Christian Zionism holds that the return of Christ will be heralded by the rapture, in which true believers will be taken to meet Jesus. However, the rapture will be preceded by the return of Jews to the Holy Land, and the conversion of Jews to Christian belief. And if they don't convert,
so that's why
they're going to burn.
So that's why they support Zionism. It's not because they just are really nice people and they think the Jews should have their own little place. It's not. That's not it. It's because they believe the Jews have to be there to either convert or go to hell and burn for eternity.
Which is funny because they want this to happen so they can meet that Jewish guy Jesus. Anyway, so
he was a pretty rockin' Jew.
He was. Jews are seen by Christian Zionists as the chosen people of earth and are therefore to be unwaveringly supported as God's army soldiering toward the apocalypse. But the Christians are the chosen people of heaven. So the Jews are the army that's marching towards the apocalypse. They're the cannon fodder. We're the cannon fodder.
We're the cannon fodder.
To ensure that the Christians can get to heaven and
unscathed.
Yeah. Christian Zionists have actively lobbied for both the return of Jews to modern-day Israel and for an end to the existence of territories administered by the Palestinian Authority. They oppose the peace process because they oppose a division of Jerusalem or of Israel. And now think about who runs our country.
Right.
Christians, right? Christian Zionist. Was it not Biden who said you don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist? I'm not, and I'm a Zionist. So is it
that's what Biden said.
Right. So is it any wonder that with these perspectives, they're blocking a peace process? So basically the Christian Zionists, and this is my final point, upholds that the Jews are the people who fail to recognize and accept the true Messiah and have thus deprived themselves of both eternal life and sound moral guidelines.
Sound moral guidelines.
So these Christian Zionists legit think that Jews are not only cannon fodder for the apocalypse, but have no sound moral guidelines. And yet they support the entity of apartheid Israel for totally selfish reasons to get them to meet Jesus. I'm not even fucking kidding.
So their support of Israel, all this, we support Israel unequivocally and stuff, all that stuff is based on anti-Semitism and based on religious nuttery.
Yeah.
Those are the two things that underline their endless support of Israel. I mean, how insane is that?
So you know how this is something that we've talked about in like mutual aid groups and things like that, like the importance of looking at who's on your side, so to speak, to determine whether you've fucked up and gone down the wrong street, down the wrong path. Because sometimes you'll be working on something and you get so tunnel vision, and then you realize, am I working with people that have an inherent disagreement about whether trans people are human or what have you? Like, it's just a good practice to get in the habit of like looking at who's on your side. I feel like this is one of those moments, if the people on your side are people who literally think that you don't have any moral guidelines, thereby probably not even a soul, maybe you should reflect,
reconsider your path.
Yeah.
Reflecting. And also the number one, some of the biggest donors to the Israeli political system, which you and I both know is run by far right lunatics. The people donating to make sure those lunatics stay in power. Some of the biggest ones are American evangelicals. It is evangelical Christians they want to keep those crazy right wingers in power in Israel.
This report notes Pat Robertson, Tim LaHaye, Jerry Falwell, like people that if you've heard of them, you're like, yeah, like the worst kind, like just, and these are the people that are like, yeah, 100% for Israel because I want to meet Jesus.
And Sheldon Adelson, who has luckily since died, but
he did die.
He did die. His wife, don't worry, his wife is continuing the hundreds of millions he donates to far-right politicians. But he was the biggest donor to Donald Trump, with like $100 million or something. It was tens of millions to Trump and tens of millions to other Republicans. He owns it's called Hayom, the far right newspaper in Israel, and it is the #1 read newspaper in Israel because it's one of the free ones that they give out on the streets to everybody. So it's the #1 readership in Israel, owned by this far right American maniac. Anyway, so
the more you know.
Moving on, but just barely. We'll get to Joe Biden's insanity in a second, but these are the massive protests that are happening. I mean, I've shown you video of massive protests happening around the world, but this is from Egypt, where the border crossing is, that they are not allowing all this aid through. And this is the people demanding the gates be open. Israeli protesters. But they stormed the gate and were trying to break down the gate in order to allow aid into Gaza. Israel's not allowing it in because they blew up the roads. Egypt's not allowing it in, I believe, because they don't want to allow more immigrants into Egypt. But it's mainly Israel that's holding it up, of course.
Well, I mean, you could just let aid in. I mean, like, we don't even have to talk about the immigration thing. Just let people get food and water and medical supplies. Right. You fucking monsters.
And here's a massive West End. This is also Egypt. I mean, tens of thousands, gotta be. And this is really rocking the Arab world. Like, this is going to have ramifications and ripple effects for years and years and years, because it's a genocide. I mean, Israel is perpetrating a full-on genocide against men, women, and children that had nothing to do with the attacks by Hamas. A third of all those murdered are children. And it's just, it's not surprising that people are furious.
No. And there's actually, I sent that to you, right? The
events?
Yeah.
Yes, I have
them.
I have them here.
Okay. The Palestinian Prisoner Solidarity Network posted a link that includes actions that are happening literally around the world, and an email address that you can have your event added to the list. Basically, just a calendar. I believe it's starting today, even, and going on throughout the coming weeks of actions that are taking place. So if you know of any that aren't listed, you can send those along, and you can also see what's happening in any place where you might be, share them with friends and family who are in those areas as well. But this is clearly, I mean, I've been seeing videos from all over the world, as you mentioned, of course, the Arab world, but also all over Europe, the United States, South America. There were, I saw a video, gosh, I can't remember if it was Venezuela, but there was, I mean, there are protests happening all over, because this is, for everyone who's not stuck in the US propaganda machine, this is just a clear-cut case of genocide. And so people across the globe are calling for an end to it because they don't want genocide.
They don't want genocide.
Like a very controversial topic.
I know. It is funny. You find yourself, I've done that multiple times over the past like 2 weeks, where I'm like, and the reason this is happening is genocide. It's do I even need to say why this is? Why people are angry? It's just obvious. Like, I don't even need to really say anything. You know what's funny is, if Israel had not responded like this, much of the world would be actually supporting Israel right now, like being like, oh man, they were attacked and it's really gruesome and there's hostages. But instead they've quickly turned the story into just they're committing all out genocide against the people.
But there's
now I know there's a long history going into this. I don't want to ignore that, but
Well, of course, but there's also evidence, and I believe WikiLeaks shared this because they had cables from like 2007
Yeah.
that showed that Netanyahu wanted Hamas to get stronger
Yeah.
because then they would be a more formidable opponent for him, and he could do what he's doing now.
And I've covered it on previous live streams a bunch. I covered that WikiLeaks leak, but also I think there's an easy argument to be made that Israel knew this or something was going to happen very soon. They supposedly have immense surveillance throughout all of Gaza. They're supposed to be the top surveillance in the world. And the idea that they didn't see at all a 2-year planning where a lot of the guns and equipment were stolen from IDF bases. I brought you those articles in previous live streams. I think you gotta really have no cynicism whatsoever to be like, yeah, they just the most surveilled place on earth, had no idea anything was about to happen. One last thing I want to say about someone's comment here. Someone was asking about, what do you mean Israel's not allowing the aid in? It's not them that's not allowing the aid in. Well, yeah, it is. First of all, there are 5 openings between Gaza, 5 crossings between Gaza and the outside world. 4 of them have been closed by Israel. One of them, the Egypt one, is closed maybe by Egypt. But that one, the one that was open, the one that before this attack was still open for humans to be able to cross out of, Israel has bombed the roadway to it. Now, the article, which was in the mainstream press that covered that, said the roadway was harmed in the fighting. Yeah.
Was harmed. Always look for that passive voice when debunking propaganda. It's always going to be that passive voice. Were killed. Was a rocket was shot.
Who knows
who did the shooting? Who did? I don't know. It just
was. Okay, so so we've talked about it. The U.S. is at war with peace right now, and this is just the other day the UN blocked. So they already had blocked a vote for a ceasefire in Gaza, but this is yesterday. The U.S. blocked, or 2 days ago, blocked a call for humanitarian pause. Like, just a humanitarian pause.
Exactly what the hell does that mean?
The U.S. blocked, meaning
pause?
it means Israel would stop bombing.
It's a ceasefire.
It's a ceasefire.
Okay.
For a moment. It's not even a ceasefire, because a ceasefire would be.
Yeah, like we technically still only have a ceasefire with North Korea. Like we never signed a peace.
Right. A ceasefire is a longer, more long-term
I'm
thing.
just wondering
where at least
how
you
long
get
a
together.
pause is.
I assume it's in the details, but where at least you get together. A ceasefire is at least like, oh, we might have talks during the ceasefire. Whereas a humanitarian pause is basically like, you stop bombing for a day. Let us get out all the, children we can and get some water in there. And then you go to town again. Like, even that, the U.S. blocked. Just a humanitarian pause.
I mean, are we shocked?
I find it repulsive.
Absolutely. You never lose your ability to be disgusted. But they had was that different from the other UN vote for a ceasefire?
Yeah.
So they keep having votes. See, this is the other thing that I find interesting about the UN.
How powerful it is.
It's just like
everyone just listens to it.
It's like you spend so much time having these votes when you know full fucking well that you can't make the US do anything. You can't make Israel do anything. So you're just like, I just like to say that I voted on this day. I voted for the thing, and it's like, but it doesn't mean anything.
The UN voted 9-1 to wag a finger at Israel like this.
It's like don't get me wrong, like there's important, like when people talk about torture program, like it's good reporting and studies that come out of the UN. They're also terrible in a lot of ways, but it's like what the fuck is this? It's all performative. I mean, it means nothing, because even if the US voted for a humanitarian pause, it'd be like, okay, the US voted for a humanitarian pause, and like there's nothing. Which is also why I find it kind of funny that they don't, because the US could just make it look like they give a shit not have to do anything, which is what especially the Democrats excel at. So my question is, why not just do this to make yourself look good?
I think the U.S. covers up a lot of what it does, but I think if they were to vote for a humanitarian pause, whatever that is, and then go behind closed doors to Israel and say, yeah, don't do it, I think that would probably come out that they were blocking it behind closed doors. So I think if they voted for this, then it probably would happen, because where the U.S. goes, the other nations go that are voting with them. But
well, I don't know. I think even not to say if the U.S. pulled funding, but if the U.S. started to wag a finger at Israel, I don't know that it would matter, because Israel is so rabid. Like, it is.
but the U.S. runs Israel.
Well,
Israel's a vassal state.
Well, right, but it seems like a rabid dog that's off its leash now. Like, that the U.S. Could have reined it in before, but now I honestly don't know, unless again they cut off funding and stopped sending weapons, which of course they're not going to. But it just seems like even if there were voices in the U.S. government that said, I think it's a little too much, I don't think Israel will give a shit.
Speaking of voices in the U.S. government, see, you're stumbling into some segues here. I'm impressed.
I am
falling backwards into segues.
Do we have to watch it though? Are you going to play it out loud?
I'm not playing anything.
Okay. I thought you were going to play Biden. Every time I hear his voice,
I'm not playing anything.
I lose 2 years
I'm
off
not.
my life.
There's nothing playing.
Okay.
And I see, now you've ruined your segue. You had it, and you were like, ha, gah!
I don't like segues.
And then the segue just was like, and just fell over.
Good. Lay there.
Speaking of people inside the U.S. state being like, I don't know about this. This is the neoliberal Huffington Post saying that there's a bit of a mutiny brewing inside the State Department over Israel-Palestine policy. I brought you the story of one man who was quitting his job, publicly resigned from his job because he could no longer be a part of weapons shipments to this massacre. But apparently he's not the only one. So there are others standing up, and they say morale is low. Staffers, some of them are just voicing complaints. Some of them are quitting. But to me, this is a big deal. I know to you and me and all of us who have understood this stuff for so long, we're like, well, of course. Why did you sign up to work with war criminals? But for them, it's surprising that it's getting to this step, that even the people who signed up to be war criminals for the American empire are like, a little bit too much.
Well, and I think, to quote Malcolm X, there was a time when you didn't know what you know now. And I think that it's important that people have these revelation, and maybe revelation is a bit too strong of a word, but these shifts, right? I was recently just speaking to both Matthew Hoh and John Kiriakou. Matthew Hoh did 3 tours with the U.S. Marines. He was a Marine Corps captain and also worked for the State Department in Afghanistan. John Kiriakou worked for the CIA and went on to blow the whistle on the CIA torture program.
And Matthew Hoh left and became a objector.
Right. A very strong, and is like an incredibly strong voice inside the peace movement. We need these people, and these people are oftentimes starting or continuing careers inside the machine, inside the system. And these people will then be able to inspire others to do the same. I'm also thinking of Mike Preisner, who has a podcast called Eyes Left, and has also said many times that he's made himself available to other folks that are in the military and want to talk about these conflicted feelings that they have. Because I get it. I can't talk about it. Lee can't talk about it because we've never been in the military. So we can't speak to what that feels like. You need these people to be able to reach out to people who know what that feels like, right? So I think that these things are super important, and I hope that somebody reads this article that's working in the State Department or the whatever department, the Department of Justice, what I don't know, and reads this and goes, "Oh, I'm not alone." Yeah. Like, there are other people that have these thoughts that can't talk about it out loud at work. That's really important. This is how those dominoes fall, and so I think. Yeah, this isn't like, oh yeah, the revolution. No, but it's like these shifts in paradigm are super important, particularly when they happen at the levels of the State Department.
Well said. See, you don't do well with the segues, but once you get on the subject, you nail it.
You know, it's like when when you gotta like walk, between classes. I want to get the work done in the class. I don't want to, the transitions are.
I'm not sure what just happened, but okay. So, all right, let's get to, and like I said, I'm not going to play it. Just relax. Let's get to the garbage that Biden spewed in his address to the nation, where where it's interesting because it's basically an admission that what the atrocities and the genocide that's going on, being perpetrated by Israel right now, is connected to all of the U.S. empire's war games. It's basically an admission of that. I mean, I don't think he realized that was his admission when they put together the speech. They wanted to lump them all together so that they could get more money to send in aid. You know what aid really is. So the White House, in the speech, he's asking for $106 billion more dollars to send to Ukraine and Israel's wars.
Does the president even have to ask Congress for money anymore? Like, because none of the wars go through Congress anymore. So, like, why did the
I don't understand all the nitty gritty. Apparently, Congress has the purse strings, so technically Congress can stop the money from going, and that's actually what caused these were simpler times, the Iran-Contra affair under Reagan, when Reagan wanted money to fight Iran, and he wanted money to fund the Contras and so he sold arms to Iran. Is that what it was? Either way, it was selling arms so that he could secretly get the money to give to another area.
It's like a military bake sale.
Yes, behind closed doors in an alley. You got a coat and you open it up and you go, I got pumpkin bread. It's like that. But so the Congress is supposed to have the purse strings. Now, Congress also is supposed to declare war, which they never do anymore. They haven't done it since Vietnam. There is no declaration of war, but they still have to approve the money that goes to these things. Now, there are some ways around it, not just the Iran-Contra affair, but also when we say that $30 billion has gone to Ukraine, largely in weaponry, etc., we're leaving out, and the mainstream media is leaving out, billions in weaponry that has been reallotted from the war in Afghanistan. So without the approval of Congress, the Pentagon and the president can take stuff from one war zone and send it over to Ukraine. It's
kind of like the 1033 program, but for Israel.
But for Israel instead of, for police.
The 1033 program, for those of you who don't know, was an Obama program that allowed, not Obama
started
program,
before Obama,
but he
there was a lot of talk during Obama.
He re-upped it when a lot of people were thinking that he wasn't going to, and the only thing he took out of there was bayonets. I'm not kidding.
It was 6 things, but bayonets was one of them.
So the 1033 program is a program that funnels military-grade weaponry to police departments. If you were ever wondering why our police are so militarized and have MRAPs, it's because they literally just got that.
If you ever see what looks like a tank rolling down your small town roads and you go, what the hell is that? That's the 1033 program.
So this is like the 1033 program, but instead of sending it to police departments, you send it to Israel, which, this is getting into an interesting cycle, which then Israel might share back with us through the deadly exchange, where the IDF trains our police departments to be more deadly and more racist and more fascist.
It's true. That's called circle jerk.
I like mine better.
Circle jerk of death? Can you get that in there?
That's a visual.
They are jerks.
Yeah.
Well,
let's workshop that one.
Okay. If you want to join us for our workshops, those are Saturdays no, I'm kidding. But
it's mostly me just saying no.
So anyway, now that we've talked about all that money reallotment and all that shit, he actually does have to ask Congress for the $100 billion. So he is now asking for $106 billion, and he has lumped together the U.S. imperial project of the proxy war in Ukraine with the U.S. imperial project of Israel, and he has lumped those together into give us all this money so that we can then money launder it and give it to the wealthiest people in the world at Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, etc. But this and also to go to even a deeper level, this is how the US economy works in many ways. Loads of money, trillions of dollars is funneled through this giant money laundering scheme called the Pentagon. And they funnel it through there, and then it gets shipped back to lobbyists, to Raytheon, to Lockheed Martin, to all of these military contractors, etc. And all that money is pumped back into the economy, mainly rich people, and it's all printed by the Federal Reserve. It doesn't actually, like, we don't actually have to worry about just endlessly printing money. Anyway, that was a bit of a tangent, but so here's Biden asking for $106 billion more.
I don't even know what
while we
106
drink
billion.
lead water.
No.
Well, we have bridges collapsing in this country. Well, we have 1 million homeless people that they don't know how to deal with, other than to pass laws saying you can beat up the homeless people.
Oh, they know how to deal with it. They just won't.
Yeah, well, yeah, they do know.
Yeah, can you imagine a president standing up in front of Congress and demanding $106 billion for, I don't know, children? Like,
I know. Could you imagine if he was like,
early learning, to make sure that kids are fed, none
Right.
of this like you owe school lunch debt bullshit. Like, imagine
if he just
that.
demanded it, if he was just like, we need this money, 100 billion
And here's the
for
thing,
poor kids.
when you try to imagine it and your brain goes, ha, that right there is all you need to know about the structure of our system. When even your brain is like, that's hilariously ridiculous because it would never happen.
Yeah. So I'm going to read a few bits of Biden's remarks to the nation so that you don't have to hear his voice. And I want to get your reaction, you know?
Oh, Jesus. Do you have
I want to get Eleanor's
do you
reaction.
have a spit bucket? I can throw up in your shoes.
He says more than 13, I'm skipping the beginning. He says more than 1,300 people slaughtered in Israel, including at least 32 American citizens. Scores of innocents.
There it is.
Scores of innocents, from infants to the elderly, grandparents, Israelis, Americans taken hostage. As I told the families of Americans being held captive by Hamas, we're pursuing every avenue to bring their loved ones home. As president, there is no higher priority for me than the safety of Americans held hostage. So it sounds like a lot of harm has been done to Israel. Has any harm been done to Palestine or Gaza? Or
well, and also
because I think it was just Israel, right? It was just Israel that's been harmed.
I mean, I think it was somebody other than Biden who said America first. I don't know. Maybe make America great again for America first. Was that Biden? This is that fucking rhetoric. So he's like basically just censuring 32 Americans, which, by the way, very good chance that these American Israelis were also like part of a different deadly exchange where American Jews, European Jews are like coaxed into going to Israel. I'm sure people know about birthright. It's where like up until age 26, you get a free, if you're Jewish, you get a free trip to Israel. Basically so that they can try to propagandize you and force you to like come live on the land and become a settler colonial. And so I don't know exactly the story of these 32 Americans, but there's a very good chance that at least some of them are part of that group.
Well, and also, you know, whether they were coaxed or not, almost all of the ones that were taken were settlers. Now, settler is a nice term. It sounds like a euphemism. It's the same thing that the Americans used when we were murdering all the indigenous here. Settler sounds nice, but settler means, yes, many of them, especially the Americans really, may not be military, but they are moving into land that the military has kicked Palestinians off of. And they are there basically to hold that ground during what has been a genocide, kicking them off the land, killing them, cutting off medicine, cutting off water, cutting off food. And so these people, although they are innocents in the sense like they're not military, so I don't support them being killed or anything like that, but they are part of this system of genocide. They have agreed to go live there as settlers. Almost exclusively. I don't know that Hamas got anywhere farther into Israel outside of the settlements, but
well, right, and we've already covered the issue of dehumanization and how we don't support the killing of civilians, even if they are settlers, because technically Lee and I are also settlers.
Anyone white in America is a
Right.
settler.
Unless you, and I don't mean the person who claims they have a Cherokee grandmother, okay, get the fuck out of here. I mean, like, unless you are legit indigenous, you're a settler in the United States, okay? And so I think that there is an important distinction to be made between settlers and military. And I also believe that the context needs to be placed, like you just did, Lee, to point out the geography of oppression, vis-a-vis the settlements and whatnot. So I think that's important. But just to highlight like how Biden just starts this whole thing by being like, and Americans were harmed. It's like, it's not about you. Like, America always has to do this shit where it's
Not
like,
about you.
I feel hurt. It's like, this isn't about you. This is like so not about you. But like, we always have to turn shit around and make it about the US. Like, Jesus Christ.
But also, important point about the hostages. And I do not support taking hostages. But this should be said whenever you talk about the hostages that Hamas is holding. Israel has thousands of hostages right now. Thousands of Palestinians that they have arrested, they keep in prison, including children, that they keep in prison without charges. So all of those hostages are there right now. Israel's holding them. Israel won't give them back. So when we hear there are 200 Israeli hostages being held by Hamas, that should piss us off. It should also piss us off that Israel has thousands of hostages that are illegal. International law, it's illegal to just imprison people without charges, without a trial, without anything.
And the settlements are illegal according to international law as well.
As well.
The UN, that entity, has pointed that out many times.
So whenever people are bringing up these hostages that Biden's bringing up in his speech, just remind them that there are thousands of Palestinian hostages right now. By the way, the rest of this live stream is free to watch at rumble.com/Lee. The link? Rumble.com/Lee Camp. Also, I have a new Linktree link. If you want to get all my stuff, my podcasts, all that stuff, that's at linktree.com/Lee Camp. I just want to make sure it doesn't start playing. But okay.
Oops.
But all right, so here's the link to join us right now, rumble.com/Lee Camp. Also, if you're on my locals page, leecamp.net, it will continue there as well. Totally free to join us at Rumble. Join us over there, rumble.com/Lee Camp. Please hit follow at Rumble and click the bell.